I knew something was wrong the moment I heard metal scraping outside my house. When I looked out the window, my car was already hooked to a tow truck, parked halfway inside my own garage. The HOA president stood nearby, arms crossed, telling the driver to hurry up. He said my vehicle was in violation. He said the HOA had authorized the tow. He said I was lucky he didn't fine me too. What he didn't expect was that towing a car from inside a private garage isn't an HOA issue. It's a police matter. And once the officers arrived, the situation spiraled in a direction he absolutely wasn't prepared for. The garage had always been straightforward. It was attached to my house, fully enclosed, and clearly part of my private property. I parked my car there every day, locked the door behind me, and never thought twice about it. There were no abandoned vehicles, no oil stains spilling into the driveway, nothing visible from the street that could even remotely be called a problem. I'd lived in the neighborhood long enough to know the HOA's routine. They cared about appearances, lawns, paint colors, trash bins left out too long. But garages were never part of their usual enforcement, especially when the doors were closed. As long as nothing spilled into common areas, they left people alone. At least they used to. A few weeks earlier, a new HOA president had taken over. He was eager, visible, very invested in reminding everyone that the board was getting serious about enforcement. Notices went out about parking rules, storage policies, and vague reminders about vehicles in violation. None of it seemed directed at me. My car was registered, operational, parked entirely inside my garage. It wasn't blocking sidewalks or fire lanes. It wasn't even visible unless the garage door was open, and even then, only briefly. So when I received an email asking residents to ensure garage compliance, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was aimed at people using garages as storage units or leaving doors open with junk spilling out. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A few days later, I noticed the HOA president lingering near my driveway during his walks. He'd slow down, glance toward the garage, sometimes stop and check his phone. Still, no notice, no warning, no explanation. Then one morning, I heard the sound that changed everything, the unmistakable scrape of metal. And by the time I realized what was happening, my car, parked inside my locked garage, was already being treated like abandoned property. That's when I learned just how far he was willing to go. I ran outside before the tow truck could move another inch. The driver paused when he saw me, clearly confused. He asked if this was my car. I told him it was. I told him it was parked inside my garage. I told him no one had permission to tow it. That's when the HOA president stepped forward. He spoke over me, confidently telling the driver the HOA had authorized the tow due to a vehicle violation. He claimed the car had been flagged for improper storage and that the garage didn't exempt it from enforcement. He said the board had voted. He said everything was documented. None of that was true. I asked to see the violation notice. He said it had already been issued. I asked when. He said it didn't matter. The tow driver hesitated. He asked to see paperwork. The HOA president waved his phone and said it was all handled internally. He told the driver to continue. That's when the situation shifted from frustrating to alarming. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was someone attempting to seize private property using confidence instead of authority. I told the driver to stop. I told him the car was inside my garage, attached to my home, and not on any common property. I told him I would be calling the police if he continued. The HOA president scoffed. He said calling the police wouldn't help. He said the HOA dealt with this kind of thing all the time. He suggested I was being dramatic and warned me that interfering with an authorized tow could result in additional fines. Neighbors started coming outside. One asked why a tow truck was in my driveway. Another pointed out that the garage door was clearly part of the house. The HOA president ignored them. He told everyone to mind their own business. The tow driver finally stopped completely. He said he wasn't comfortable towing a car from inside a garage without police confirmation. He said he'd been told it was a violation, but nothing about private property had been mentioned. That admission hit hard. The HOA president had called the tow company and left out the most important detail. I asked the driver who authorized the tow. He pointed at the HOA president. I asked the HOA president again, calmly, what rule allowed him to tow a vehicle from a locked garage. I asked him to show me the section of the bylaws that gave him that power. He didn't answer. Instead, he raised his voice. He said garages fell under HOA jurisdiction if vehicles were involved. He said enforcement didn't stop at the garage door. He said the board had given him discretion to act in the community's interest. The words sounded official. They weren't. I stepped back and called the police. While we waited, the HOA president kept talking. He warned me about legal consequences. He told the tow driver he was contractually obligated to proceed. He told neighbors that I was obstructing enforcement. But something had changed. The tow driver didn't move. The neighbors didn't leave. And the HOA president's confidence started to crack. When the police dispatcher confirmed officers were on the way, the HOA president suddenly suggested we pause and sort it out later. He said maybe there had been a misunderstanding. He said the board could review the situation again. It was the first time he'd shown any hesitation, because now this wasn't just about HOA rules. It was about whether he had just crossed a legal line that couldn't be waved away with a clipboard, and everyone standing there knew it. The police arrived quietly. No sirens, no drama, just two officers stepping out of the car and immediately taking in the scene. A tow truck blocking my driveway, my car partially lifted, neighbors gathered, and the HOA president standing off to the side, arms folded like he still believed he was in charge. One officer asked a simple question. "Who owns the vehicle?" I said I did. He asked where it was parked. I pointed to the garage. The officer walked over, looked at the door, the hinges, the structure attached directly to the house. He didn't rush. He didn't argue. He just nodded and turned back to the HOA president. "Why is a tow being attempted from inside a private garage?" The HOA president launched into his explanation. He said the HOA had authority over vehicles. He said the car was in violation. He said garages didn't exempt residents from enforcement. He mentioned community standards, board decisions, and internal policies. The officer let him finish. Then he asked one question that ended everything. "Do you have written consent from the homeowner or a court order allowing entry into this garage?" The HOA president froze. He said consent wasn't required. He said the HOA didn't need one. He said they'd handled situations like this before. The officer shook his head. He explained that towing a vehicle from inside a private garage without consent or a warrant wasn't an HOA issue. It was a potential criminal one. He explained that the garage was part of the residence, not a common area. He explained that authorizing a tow under those circumstances could expose everyone involved to serious liability. Then he turned to the tow driver. He told him to lower the car immediately. The driver didn't hesitate. As the car settled back onto the concrete, the HOA president tried one last time to assert control. He said this would be revisited. He said fines could still be issued. He said the board would escalate. The second officer finally spoke. He told the HOA president that any further attempts to tow, enter the garage, or interfere with my vehicle without proper legal authority would result in consequences. He advised him to consult an attorney before taking any further action. The neighbors were silent. The tow truck pulled away. And the HOA president, who had started the morning convinced he was enforcing the rules, was now being instructed on the limits of his power by people who actually understood the law. In that moment, the entire balance shifted, because once law enforcement made it clear where HOA authority ends, there was nothing left for him to argue, only the reality he had tried to ignore, and it had just shut him down in front of everyone. After the police left, the driveway went quiet. The HOA president didn't say another word. He gathered his clipboard, avoided eye contact, and walked away without the confidence he'd arrived with. The tow truck was already gone, and my car sat exactly where it belonged, inside my garage. Later that afternoon, I received an email from the HOA management company. Not a warning, not a fine, a reversal. They confirmed the tow attempt had been unauthorized. They stated that no vehicle parked inside a private garage could be subject to HOA towing. They added that future enforcement actions involving garages would require written notice and homeowner consent. The earlier violation was officially closed. A few days later, another message went out to the neighborhood clarifying vehicle enforcement rules. Garages were explicitly mentioned as private property. The language was careful, legal, final. Neighbors started reaching out. Some thanked me for standing up. Others admitted they'd worried the HOA could do the same thing to them. One person said they'd always assumed the board had more power than it actually did. That assumption was gone now. As for the HOA president, his behavior changed noticeably. He stopped walking the neighborhood with his phone out. He stopped making on-the-spot decisions, and every notice after that came with actual citations and proper process. The garage stayed the same, the door stayed locked, the car stayed parked, and no one ever tried to cross that boundary again. The whole situation reinforced something important. HOAs can set rules, but they don't own your property. They can't invent authority, and they definitely can't tow a car out of a private garage just because someone decides it's in violation. In the end, I didn't need to fight. I just needed to let the law speak louder than a title. And once it did, everything fell back into place, exactly where it belonged.